So what we want to address today are really some applications that we've developed over the past 10 or 12 years that deal with really resolving risk and conflicts, segregation of duties, reporting, auditing, monitoring user activity, those types of things within the Lawson application. So we're really focused on, these products are focused on just the Lawson and Landmark applications. So this isn't network security, this isn't database auditing, this is actual, more really restricted to just the auditing and segregation of duties and reporting within the Infor product suites, right, S3 and Landmark. So I'll take you through how some of that functionality works, show you a lot of screenshots. I'm going to do this in a PowerPoint primarily so I can cover all the products. And then as we have time, I'll jump in and show you actually how some of that functionality works. See if I can hide some things on the screen here. All right. So a little bit, did I skip too far there? I might have. Let's see. All right, so just a little bit about us. Kinsey's been around since '83. We've been doing Lawson implementations since '97. We do a lot of net new implementations. We do a lot of upgrades. Actually, today, I noticed on the registration, we probably have 15 of our existing product customers on this webinar today, probably just picking up some extra education or looking at some of the additional functionality we've added. And then a number of you are actually would be new or maybe haven't seen these solutions. So we have, and this is a little outdated, we have well over 100 installations of what you'll see today. Now, not everybody has every component. So I'll go through and explain to you what each of the components does. And a number of our customers might have 3 or 4 of these, but maybe not all 7 or 8. Missed one of my slides, but bear with me here. Okay, I don't know, one of them got hidden. That's okay. It was just the some of the content I wanted to cover. So let's talk about what we're really trying to do here is the objective is to increase visibility into your applications, getting access to information you haven't traditionally had, or it's very difficult to get, or you might have to go to IT to get this information. And then figure out how do we decrease the risk. So how do we resolve conflicts in security? How do we monitor what users are doing in the application? How do we make sure that when roles are provisioned to users, that they're having the proper roles and that they're not open to too much of the application to, again, cause segregation of duty violations. So when we increase visibility, so we're looking at user reporting, segregation duties, the monitoring, and I'll talk to you about that application, and then how we audit critical processes. So that could be transactions or that could be security changes, right? And so then on the decreased risk side, we'll see how do we remediate and resolve some of those conflicts we have with SOD, and then how do we look at tuning our security and what tools do we have to help you on what level of access people have, what are they actually using in the application, because we find a lot of customers that have, users have access to forms that they never use. Well, we can identify those, point those out, and you can actually tune your security. And then we'll talk about how we do our modeling application, how we, when roles are built, to make sure they validate within our SOD policies, if we're adding new roles to users, to make sure that combining roles together don't cause problems, those types of things. So the major risks that our customers have come back to us, and we've done research on, and what we're trying to resolve within this are, this improper role design. So this is where a role has too much authority to do something within the application. So we want to look at, can we validate that our roles that are provisioned so that if I'm checking them against my SOD policies, I want to make sure roles, in fact, don't violate those policies. Because when I assign them to users, if the role itself violates, and I know those users are going to violate, I also want to look at combination of roles. So we're looking at the proper role design and how that fits within your model. So then we want to look at privileged access. Do users have, do the IT users have access to sensitive data? And if they do, are you monitoring what they're doing? Do you have activity monitor on, or do you have transaction auditing on to know what the IT users that might have that level of access are doing within the application? And of course, we want to make sure end users don't have the ability to do some things that IT can do. So these are the types of things we're looking for. We don't want shared user IDs. So if an auditor comes through and wants to know about a transaction, we don't want to have shared user IDs because we can't tell maybe who actually made that entry. So we can track that activity by IP address, and we can see whether or not we have shared identities going around the application. And then how, who's responsible for monitoring or actually changing user security, who's adding roles, who's building roles. The SOD controls that we've talked about where, we want to make sure a person can't, create a fraudulent transaction. We shouldn't be able to enter a temporary vendor and enter an invoice for that vendor and make a payment. Somebody that does, purchasing probably shouldn't also be able to do receipts and do transfers. So those types of things, we're going to check the security model to see whether or not you've provisioned access to people that can actually go through that process of performing those functions. So this, I'm a little thrown off here because I couldn't figure out where this slide was. So now this is what I wanted to go through. And so these are in fact the applications we use for all the issues that we brought up and what our objective is. So security reporting. So this is again for S3 and for Landmark. So it's going to be all user-based security and really down to the object level. Now most people are concerned about what forms do users have access to and what action can they take on that form. So can they do changes? Can they only do inquiries? When you get over to the Landmark side, it isn't forms anymore, but it's business classes, and we have to know whether or not that user has an inquiry access to that form, if they have unconditional access to that form. So those reports, we have tools that will generate how your roles are defined, how your classes are defined, what user provisions are for what roles. And again, I can not only get just a user role assignment, but I can get it all the way down to their table assignments, programs, categories, forms, any type of object in the security model. Now the segregation of duties then, well, we deliver over 200 policies that use a couple thousand rules to go through and check your model to see if we have roles or people that are in violation of those policies. We're actually building out some more functionality into that it allows you to do some remediation so that you can, once you've identified a problem, you can go through the process of, what do I need to fix this now? So we use our modeling application, we look at user activity, and we find out where is our highest degree of risk, and using the modeling application, can I simulate a change to see if that would resolve the violation that I have? So with SOD, we're doing a lot of things where we're not only just identifying what the SOD risk is, but we're giving you tools to help you resolve those and change your security model and doing it in a modeling aspect so that you don't actually have to make those changes until you know if in fact it's going to work. So, there's going to be a lot of different iterations of security you might have to change, but you have to have reporting and understand when you make a change at a lower level in the security model, how many people are impacted by that. So we go through that process of allowing you to make those changes in our application to simulate how many people are going to be impacted by that change. So then the security auditing is where we're looking at changes to security. So we want to monitor those. So once we have segregation of duties cleaned up, once we make sure we have our user role assignments the way they need to be, what we need to do is monitor security changes because something could change in the model that would in fact now cause a violation in the policy. So we have notifications that you can build in on changes to security. We have notifications on segregation of duties. So if a policy does get violated by a user, you'll get a notification of that. And that, again, that could have happened based on a security change. So that's what on the security side, we're reporting, SOD, auditing, and modeling. On the transaction side, then, we're looking at all the activity flowing through the Lawson application. So at a summary level, we're going to give you the activity monitor piece that will look at every form that every user has been in, the date and the time they're in that form, the action they took, they do a next, previous, change, add, and the key to that record. So it's a high-level summary of really kind of footprint of where everybody's been in the application. When you get into transaction auditing, we can then actually look at the data they were viewing or changing. So this will do inquiries, and it'll do changes and deletes. So if I want to know what data was changed on a form, any of the 7,000 forms in Lawson, any of the forms in Landmark, the business class has been Landmark, the forms in S3, we can track that activity and tell you what the value was before and what it was changed to, who did it, when they did it, that sort of thing. Now these applications are built so they can all run independent of each other. The SOD remediation process does require a couple of the components. You have to have SOD, you have to have activity monitor, you need to have security reporting, and you need to have modeling. But that really pulls those four applications together into one tool that will do a number of things for you to help you resolve those conflicts. So let's look at increasing visibility. So what are user access reports like? What's SOD look like? The monitoring and the auditing. So this is the security dashboard for just the S3, the Lawson S3 applications. And you'll see a lot of our customers, this will look familiar to you. So you have all your user reporting. So I have my user roles, user role security class, and user role security class form, different levels, depending on how much detail I want to look at. So we have a number of different user reports, attribute reports. We even give you disabled users. So I think on the Lawson standard functionality, if a user is disabled, they still show up on all the security reports. We filter those users out. But we'll give you separate reports of the users that are disabled. So we also have all the role reports and security class reports, so you know how your roles are structured, you know how your security classes are structured. Now, on the landmark side then, it goes to actors. So we have the actors, we have the full LPL, we have a parsed LPL version that will break it all down so you can actually export this to Excel. You can search through that LPL. That's the Lawson's pattern language. It doesn't just use function codes anymore. It's more of a scripted language. So we parse that all out and break it down for you. But again, we'll do this for the roles and the security classes and what the actor level security is. So if I'm looking at these are my user reports now. So we have to, when we're talking about, evaluating what a user has access to and doing reviews of where they have access, we have just a high-level grid of all your users, all the roles, and where a user, or what roles those user has access to. So if I'm working within the browser and the role has an X in there, and it's blue because I actually have a link and I can drill to more detail behind that. So for any one of these users, I could drill into the detail behind, show me what classes are in that role, show me all the objects that are assigned to that role, security class, all objects. So we can drill down further into the detail of just this matrix. But if you're looking from a high-level overview of just somebody needs to review the users and what role assignments they have, this is one tool you can use to do that. Now, in addition to that, we provide probably a more familiar format with you, which would just be the users and the roles assigned. What we can do in our reporting is look at things from the top down to the bottom up. So in this case, I'm looking at a user role report, but I could easily on this reverse the grouping on this and look at a role user. So I identify one role and show me all the users that have that role. So as I go into the presentation of the demo, I'll show you how we can do this, how we invert the security model so that you can actually look from the lower level up or from the top down. But in this case, I'm looking at a user, and this user has, user A Davis has 8 roles. And I can drill into any one of these, the level of detail I want to see. And what I'm going to get here, in this case, I drill to the user role security class form. I don't have all objects here, so I don't have tables and I don't have programs, but that is available. And I'll see what the rule is for that user. Now, we always give you the available function codes on that form, and then what the rule is set for that user. So you can run this report starting at this level. So you can pick that off the dashboard, I'm going to say a user access report, down to every form they have access to and what their permissions are. And then again, we do something very similar on the landmark side. So on landmark here, I'm going to have an actor and I'm going to have roles. And I can, just like I could with S3, I can drill down and I can see every object. I can see, I can see all the business classes and I can see the rule. And again, we're going to parse out this paragraph of LPL language and break it down into line items for you so it's a little more intuitive and easier to understand. So the first thing we're trying to do with this is increase the visibility, is give you these security reports. Now, I won't spend too much time here, but we have this security analyzer that allows you to line your users up side by side. So if you're managing a department and you want to see, your 10 users, and I want to see them in a format more within Excel, and a lot of times our customers working with their auditors, they want this format. And there's some unique things that we do here. We don't allow you to filter out any information. So you can pick what users, but you're going to get everything for that user. You can't filter out a role. We have to make sure that any report we turn over to an auditor has everything regarding that person included on that report. But we will do things like resolve conflicts. So as most of you are probably familiar, that in Lawson, it's the least restrictive access is the access a user will get to a form. So if they have a path through a role in a security class that's all inquiry, but they have another route to that same form that's all access is going to win, and that's the level of security provision that will be for that user. What this report will do is resolve that for you. So if we have customers will have 3 or 4 different ways of getting to a form, and this will roll up to your single line underneath that user for that form, the level of access they have. So when somebody not familiar with how Lawson security works, or Lawson itself, like an auditors a lot of times aren't, they can go down to those critical forms that they want to review, go across the page, and look at the level of access for those users. And we actually do this for forms, programs, all the different objects, securable types, fields, element groups, all those different sheets are on this spreadsheet. So that's on the reporting side of where you don't have to have access into the Lawson security now to generate these reports. Generally, you do. You have to be able to run the admin tool to be able to run any of the reports Lawson has. We also connect all the dots. So they'll have a user role report, they'll have a role security class report, but we link those all together. So you have a full user role security class object report on report. You don't have to put it together. But again, you don't have to, now if you don't have access to get into the application, if you have access to our application, you can run these reports yourself. So now, segregation of duties. So we pre-build and deliver. There's actually about 300 policies, but only 220 of them, and that's all I put on the slide anymore, are actually activated when we start the application. The other ones are really process policies, and that would be like the person that prints the checks can't mail the checks. So there are ways in our application, depending on how you build your security model and roles that you create, where you can check for those types of policies as well. But right now, when we deliver it only based on actual forms that are in Lawson. So again, there's 220 of those, and we use, it's probably 2,200 or 2,300 rules. I'm not sure exactly how many rules we have that'll check for the violations in those policies. So the reason there's so many more rules is because if I have to go back to the example of somebody can do vendor maintenance, shouldn't be able to do invoice entry, we check for AP 10.1, AP 10.2, and AP 16.1 on the vendor maintenance side, and then we check a number of different ways on the AP 20.1, .2, .3 that you can do in invoice entry. So we're checking every combination to make sure a user doesn't have some level of add, change, delete access to those forms. If it's only inquiry access, that's fine with us. But if they have add, change, delete, so they can enter a vendor and enter an invoice, that's a conflict in our mind. So these policies are not something that Kinsey has come up with. These are really probably industry standard policies, and we've just adapted the rules based on Lawson to those policies. So I won't spend too much here. There is an analytics page that will give you graphs based on the level of importance of that policy. So you can rate these policies as a 1 to 5 star rating, and those critical policies that you want to check to see if we have violations of those policies will show up as red on these graphs. So the different colors just are basically the level of importance of those policies. So when we create a policy, we do it based on the forms within Lawson. Now you can build your own policies based on roles or security classes. So if you want to make sure a user doesn't have, financial supervisor and HR supervisor, then you can make sure those 2 roles are not assigned to any one person and build the policy that way. You can build it by security class. We deliver everything pre-built by form because every Lawson client starts with the same group of forms. So again, we many different categories. So we have closing procedures, inventory, order entry, payables, receivings, HR. There's a lot of different categories that we have. Cash management, I think we have 9 now, that will have policies predefined to check your security model. Now, an example, we'll give you a spreadsheet similar to this where you can review these policies. You can always obviously go in and print them out or look at them online, but we have these policies pre-built, and this would be an example of one of the rules for maintain a fictitious vendor and create a payment. So we're checking the forms on the left, the AP 10.1, 2, and AP 16, against the forms on the right. So in this case, because there's 3 forms, we're actually doing 9 rule checks for that one policy. But this is just an example of what we're delivering on the S3 side. On the landmark side then, we have some samples that we'll deliver based on the same policies, but it's landmark logic. So now it gets down to what security classes you have access to, that can perform those functions. So we can build those out as well, and we can deliver it based on these standard templates from Lawson. So, again, maintain fictitious vendor would be the AP vendor setup template. Security class is standard security class versus the invoicing security class. So we will deliver these 200 policies for you. Currently, we're not delivering all the rules for the landmark because it's changing all the time. We're seeing if you're Cloud Suite and you're hosted by Lawson, we're seeing changes to these security classes constantly, and the addition of new classes. So, our concern is we can deliver it with classes pre-built, but as Lawson makes changes, we're not necessarily picking up every time they go in and add a new class that can do vendor maintenance. We don't know about that. So you'll have to do some maintenance here on the landmark side to build these yourself. But we do deliver the policies so you know what you need to watch out for. So then when we run these reports, we build them into these two groups, and we're going to give you by user, we're going to tell you what policies they violated. So in this case, I'm seeing Frank Nelson. I think I can go in here. You'll see here's the description of the policy. Here's the forms that we're checking for in that policy. And, of course, here's the violation. And, again, because these are blue, it's a link. I can drill right into my security model. So I might want to look at AM145, show me every other class that belongs to, or show me everything that's in the AC capitalization security class. That will drill into our security reporting. But we'll provide these reports in this grid format here, or this kind of a tree format, that'll give you the left grouping, the right grouping, and where your conflicts are, and what your level of security is for that person. So we deliver those either by user, or you can get them by policy. So I can see a policy and all the users have violated. A couple ways of looking at it. So right now we're in this where we're just trying to identify all these areas. We've got reporting and we've got segregation of duties. We're not actually resolving any of these yet, but we're identifying where we have potential risk. So then we get into monitoring sensitive activity. So again, this is where I'm looking at the activity flowing through Lawson. So on Activity Monitor, what we're going to do is we're going to capture everything that comes in through the regular Lawson portal transaction or through an add-in, or we can do process flows too. So it's got to be an AGS or DME call initiated within Lawson. And I'm going to pick up the user, the form. I'll have the IP address. I don't think I'm showing it here because I can hide columns. And you'll see I get the function code, the date and the time, and the key to that record. So I'll know any employee that gets looked at or any vendor that gets changed. In this case, I'm at the summary level, right? So I'm not seeing all the detail behind what was done on this form or what changes might have been made, but I'm seeing that the user was in these forms and making changes. So when you're going back and trying to trace back to a problem or an issue, and you want to know, who made a change to a specific journal entry, we have that here. I don't know necessarily what the change is here, but I know who did it. I know the date and the time it was done. I know it was GL 40.1. I have all that information. And there's a lot of things we can do with this. So in this case, for Activity Monitor, there's no rules behind this. We'll pick up everything that runs through Lawson. When I get into transaction auditing, then we do want some audit rules. So most of our customers that run transaction auditing also run Activity Monitor, because on the auditing side, they may only be looking at auditing the detail behind maybe 100 forms. But the Activity Monitor will pick up all 7,000. So what we don't want to have is a gap in your audit data. So we'll show you the detail behind the forms that you've selected to audit the detail on and the summary level for everything else. So then this is the detail of the transaction. So this is a journal entry change, and I just built a little query that said I want to know everything done by a particular user, probably on a date range, and it'll come up and it'll show me all the forms that I had changes for by the user Lawson. I see HR 11.3, PR 36. I see the key to the record, and if I expand the More button, then I'll get the detail behind what that change was. In this case, I see a change from 1,500 to 1,700 on a journal entry. Now, we capture all the data that's actually being passed through on this form. So I have an option on my parameters of whether I only want to show the changes or if I want to show everything. In this case, I like to say only show me the changes that were done on that form, but I could flip that parameter and I could see all the data, every line item that was on that journal entry, and all the detail behind that. It's just this was the only field that was in fact changed. So you can build these reports on either the monitor or on the detail level. They can have notifications behind them if you're concerned about certain critical data being changed. We even have the option to build a report where a specific piece of data just has changed. So if the department gets changed on an employee, or if a pay rate gets increased, or if terms code on a vendor gets changed, you can just define that field where the vendor term code has changed, and we'll generate a report for you that you might get once a month on all the vendors where that detail was actually changed. So there's a lot of different ways to build custom reports, and you can do them all within the browser UI that we provide. No other third-party products are required to do that. Right. So that's what we're looking on the visibility. We want to give you reporting. We want to show you where your SOD violations are. We want to show you what users are doing within the system, and when they make changes, we want to show you what those changes are. So now on the decreasing risk side, we want to look at how do we fix these SOD problems that we have. How do we tune our security to prevent people from accessing forms that they don't even use, so we can tell you what they're using and what they have access to, right? And then how do we look at making sure our roles are provisioned correctly, make sure our roles are defined correctly, that type of thing. So let's step through that. So this is our risk analysis grid that comes with the SOD remediation product. Now the difference on this is I'm going to measure the level of the risk based on what users are actually doing in the application. So in this case, I'll see all my users and I'll see all the policies that I want to use on this grid. And if there's a green box, it tells me that that user is in violation of the policy, but they're not using any of the forms currently, or they haven't used any forms that they have access to that are creating that problem. If there's a yellow, they're using a form that's on one side of the grouping. So maybe they're using AP 10.1, but they're not doing any invoice entry. So probably okay, there's too much exposure based on security, but they're in fact not really doing anything they shouldn't be able to do. They're only working in one set of forms. Now, if it's red, that tells us this employee is working in forms on both sides, or both groups on that SOD policy. So back to that example, they're doing vendor maintenance, or doing changes, or doing adds to vendors, and they're also entering invoices. So what I might want to do here then is focus in on the red violations. Now I can pull up these grids based on star ratings and violations. So I may only care about the 5-star policies that are red, and that's where I want to start looking at how do I resolve some of these conflicts. So when I drill into the detail of any one of these conflicts that I see on the grid, I can then get more detail behind it. Well, we're actually going to use some of our modeling to help you figure out a plan on how to resolve this. So in this case, I'm seeing now all the users, and I can see the forms up here on the right, and I see that Lawson used AP 10.1 and AP 20.1. The other users have access to these forms, but they're not using them currently. And if I look down here on the left, I'll see this is the user's access. So they have these 3 forms out of AP maintenance, and they have these, 5 forms out of AP processing, and I can tell the number of times they've used it. By clicking on any one, clicking on the number, I'll actually go into the detail of Activity Monitor, and I'll tell you what vendors that they worked on, and I'll tell you what invoices that they worked on. Now you can see whether or not I might have a conflict because they're working on, they made a change to a vendor, then they entered an invoice for that vendor. Maybe I need to find out what's going on. So you can drill that detail. Now additionally, if you want to try to resolve this conflict, you can click on the form you want to work with. In this case, I clicked on AP 10.1, and it brought up a grid on the right and showed me all the users have access to AP 10.1. And there's different actions you can take here. Say, well, what if I just made AP 10.1 inquiry only in the, in the AP maintenance security class? Well, that might impact a lot of people. So we're going to show you, just by making a change like that, it might roll up to more people than you're intending to. Then we'll give you the option of what if I delete AP maintenance from financial supervisor, or what if I delete financial supervisor from the role or from the user. Do any of those types of actions where they solve this problem. In this case, I'm simulating deleting AP maintenance from the financial supervisor role to see if that would resolve my problem, and I can repaint my grid, and if I get check marks in here, that tells me that not only I might have been working on just 157, but that actual security class was causing a problem across a number of other policies. So by removing that one security class from financial supervisor, I could potentially solve a number of problems that I have. Now, you may have to come back and say, okay, whatever is in AP maintenance, we're going to make it an AP maintenance inquiry and give access, inquiry-only access to those forms, and that would be okay with us. So we're building in the simulation, we're taking the detail from Activity Monitor, we're taking your security reporting and your SOD reporting, putting them all together and coming up with this risk analysis grid on what are the areas that we really need to address. And again, because you can rate these policies as 5-star, you can hone in on exactly which one's the most important to you. Now, we have a new application, new reporting, that'll be coming out this spring. What we're trying to do is analyze which security classes are really causing the most problems for your organization within the SOD model. So we see often with our clients that install the application is that it's not just a role that's violating a policy. So I'm not just putting AP maintenance and AP processing together that's causing a problem, because we can already do role testing like that, but we don't really test down to the security class. So we're developing the reporting app so that I can test to see what security classes are causing me the biggest issue. Again, we have a number of clients where a security class on its own violates one of our policies. So they'll put all the AP maintenance, the AP 10.1.2 and all the AP 20s into one class. So that class by itself, whatever role it's attached to and whatever users have that role, everybody's going to violate that policy, or any policies for matter that go against the forms that are in that security class. So we're trying to identify at a much lower level where you really have problems and what classes you might have to change properties on, either break them apart or change the rule on a form so they don't cause these violations. Because we see a lot of that where I think we were a little bit surprised. We knew roles would be problematic for people. We didn't expect them to have classes that would have segregation of duty violations just within the class alone. So that's something new that's currently under development that we're going to be able to identify where those problematic classes are. You can then, and you'll see some of this is actually working now, but we haven't got all the thought process done on it. But we can also then from that drill into what users are impacted by that class, what rules are we talking about. So in this case, I see like B. Thomas, rule number 1, the object that's the problem is AM 145 in that AC capitalization security class. So that security class is causing a problem for these different users on those specific rules. So that's a class we probably need to analyze to say, what do we need to do with this class to make sure it adheres to our SOD policies? Because anybody that has it is going to break all these policies. So that's our object violation report. So now when we get to tuning security then, it's what are people using versus what do they have access to. So in this case, I have a user security versus activity query that'll show me the user, the role, security class, the form, and how many times they've used it. Now I sorted it by hits or number of times they use the form in descending order just so I can see some data on the screen. But I can then drill into, I can click on the number of hits, and it'll tell you how that user is using that form. So if they're only doing inquiries and they have full access, you may want to tune that down. If they're never using the form and they have access to the form, you may want to take it away. So you can run this for any individual user and just say, I want to see everything they have access to and what they're actually using and how they're using it, and you'll get that data. Did I go too far there? Let me make sure. Okay, so now, minimizing provisioning errors. So now we have users set up, and we're defining roles within the application, and there's a number of things that you may want to do. One is you may want to put roles together that you're not sure will those cause a problem. So I can go out in our SOD application, I can do a couple things. I can pick a user currently in the system, I'll read all the roles they currently have, and then you can check, and I'll give you a full list of roles as well, and then you can either unassign, or you might say, okay, I'm going to take this role away from the user and I'm going to add a new role to them. You can simulate that, and you can just check on or off which roles you want, and again, we'll identify by user and default check based on the user you pick, and then you can run a report to know whether or not, if you do this role change for a person, is that going to cause SOD violations? You might do this, you might not want to take a role away, you might just be adding a new role to a person, and you don't know if that's going to cause a problem. Any combination of roles or an individual role can be tested against all the policies before you actually assign that role or make that change in security. And we're gonna come back and we're gonna give you a report. And you'll see up here, it's not by user, but it's by a combination of two roles. And I can see that, you know, this is a chance where there's a probability that AC accountant on its own was fine, and AC data entry on its own was fine. But when I put them together, I have a problem. So again, we'll allow you to test roles individually to make sure my roles are okay, or any combination of roles. Or again, pick a user, we'll find all those roles, and then manipulate the combination on how you're actually going to make the assignment to check it before you do it. Then that kind of gets with what we do security modeling. So it's the same kind of thing. When you go in and want to start making changes to security, it'd be nice to know what is it going to look like before I make the change. So, you know, you can make those changes, go through the test environment, try to test everything, but we'll just allow you to mimic or simulate that change, run a report, and we'll tell you what level of access you have. So we'll have the ability to go in and add a role to a user or multiple roles, remove roles from a user, add a security class to a role, or remove a security class from a role. And if we're playing with roles where I'm adding and removing classes, I'm going to give you every user on that report that has that role, because I have to know how many people are going to be impacted if I remove a class from a role, and we'll do that on our report. So in this case, I went into my role modeling application, and I'm going to remove, I think I'm removing AP maintenance from the entry clerk role. So I've told it that's what I want to try to do. And then I'm going to go ahead and run a report. When I run a report, it looks just like the access analyzer that we showed before, where again, I'm going to resolve those conflicts. So I'm going to have 4 potential colors show up depending on what you're doing. If it's in black, there's been no change to that person's security. If it's in blue, you've added security. Oh, I'm sorry, if it's in blue, you've changed their security. So something happened, you removed something, so they either lost security to it or they went from all access to inquiry only. You've done something to actually change their level of security. If it's in green, you've added option to get to that object that they didn't have before. And if it's in red, you remove that level of security. So in this case, I can see that I removed access, I removed AP maintenance out of entry clerk, so that shows up as red. And if I look at this, for A. Davis here, they had 2 ways of getting to it before. They had all access and all inquiries, so their level would have been all access, because least restrictive wins. When I remove the all access option, now all inquiry wins. So it shows up in blue as all inquiry is now their level of security because all access is removed. Again, I do this on not just forms, but we'll do it on the categories, on the programs, on the tables, any of the objects that are in security. You can see the level of impact, and it's color coded, so you know, did I add, is it all green? Means I just gave this person a bunch of things, access to things I didn't know they were going to have access to. That's what the role modeling and security class modeling will allow you to do that. Now, once you have this the way you want it, and you think you're viewing the information as the level of access you want to give somebody, you can run the SOD report against the model of what you simulated, and we'll tell you whether or not that user now has violations based on what you've just done. Now, the other thing we can do is just do some role testing against a user that you may want to set up in the system. So I have a user out there I call a simulated role user. And what I want to do is I'm going to go in and I have somebody joining the organization. We're going to give them 3 roles or 5 roles. So what I can do is I can come in here and I can simulate what if I were just to give that user these 5 roles and then run reports on that and see what level of access they're going to have. So when I run those reports, because they're new and I'm adding things, everything shows up in green. But I can do this without actually ever going into security and assigning these roles to a user and running reports. I can just come in here, take a user, I can add these roles on, I can run these reports, and I can also check it against SOD reports. I don't know if I have any here. Yeah, I can also run it against SOD. And in this case, it'll come back and show me what has changed in SOD. Well, this is new for this user, so everything's going to show up in green. And I can see that, oh, I've added these 3 roles, and these roles are in violation of some of our policies when I put them together. But you can kind of see what we're trying to do here on all these applications, many of them, is make sure that once you have your segregation of duties cleaned up, that you have ways to maintain that and test things before you actually start breaking that model and just assigning roles or classes. We'll even go down to the object level where you can simulate that. So, and that would be here. So now if I want to go in and say I want to change I want to change the rule on AP20. What have I got here? I have HR11 on this example. So if I put in HR11.1, I'm going to show every class it's in. I'll show every role it's got assigned. I'll show every user has access to it. And I can click on either the class, the role, or the user and draw a map to how does that user have access and what level of security do they have. And then there's a number of things you can do here. I can delete HR11 from one of the security classes. I can add it to another security class. I can change the rule on the for HR11 on a specific security class. And what it does over here at the right is it will constantly change what their level of security is based on the action you're taking. So if I were to delete it out of a class where they had all access and they have a different way to get all inquiry, those will change to all inquiry. Or if I use function codes, they'll change to the proper function codes. So I can go in here and see everybody that might be impacted by making a change down at an object level. Because that's what happens with the security model is that because it's role security class form or object, if you make a change to that, there's a number of people that could be impacted at a higher level. And this will tell you who those are. And then again, there's a run SOD. If I were to say, okay, I have the change the way I want to delete it, or I wanted to add it to a new class, you can run an SOD report to see, okay, is that going to cause a problem with the user that they may not have had before? So even if you don't run the SODs, you can still simulate what's going to happen. You can still run all the role reporting and role modeling, and you can run the object modeling to find out what would happen if I were to make this change. Now, back on the maintaining compliance end, we have that individual role testing. So I talked to you about the composite role. This is the way we do it very similar, where I just come in and I just pick the role. These are roles that are already in the system, not the ones that I may simulate how I would build them, but these will be built in security. I can come in, I can just get a list of my roles, check the role, run a report, and it's going to come back and tell me if the role test performed against the role entry clerk and where I potentially have violations. And I do have violations here. So that role on its own is already broken. So obviously anybody that gets this role is going to have SOD violations. Then the last piece is really security auditing. So again, we do this both S3 and we do it for landmarks. So any change to the security model, we're going to track through our reporting. We give you the ability to create reports, date range reports, user reports, object reports. You know, if you want to know any change made to GL40.1, if a change is made to that, I want to get an email notification there's been a change to the security on that object. If there's a change to a user, you know, whatever kind of change you want to monitor, or if you just want to know, I want to know all the changes that happened this week, send me a report. You have this ability to create these reports, save them, and just get these notifications on these changes. So many of our customers will set up security audit notifications and SOD notifications, and because the changes to security can cause an SOD violation, and they want to monitor that. Okay. So real quick on this, and just people that are curious, it is, I don't know if anybody's on 9 anymore, but supports for 9, 10, and 11, supports on-prem or supports for cloud, right? It's like a 3-day install depending on the number of applications you have, and it's all done remote. Training's remote, implementation's remote, and you're actually, I think people are surprised at how quick that they're actually running and getting information off the report. So it does require a VM server on your end that we give you the specs on. Again, we'll do remote installation, and within a week of that VM being ready, sometimes a couple of days, if you only have a couple of the applications, you'll be actually generating reports. So let me show you a little bit of how some of this works. I won't be able to get through everything, and I always know I'm not going to be able to get through everything. Just so you can see actually how some work and product works here for the last 10 minutes or so. So we'll start with security reporting because that's kind of how I went through the presentation. This is the dashboard that you saw. I'll make it a little bigger. So if I want to look at like user role security class form, let's just look at the query a lot of people want to run because it gives them the level of access they want to see by user. A lot of different ways to do filtering. I can pick individual users. We'll pull a list of your users. You can add the users to the right, that sort of thing. And you can just work on the users you want to work with or the department you want to work with. For now, I'm going to remove all and take everybody here. So I can filter on roles, security classes, forms. And it pulls back this grid of data, right? It gives me every user, every piece of security at the form level you have in your application. I just pulled in here 14,000 records. A lot of our customers pull in hundreds of thousands of records pull into this grid. Now, this grouping, what I can do is I can click on user and sort by user, and I can group it by user, role. I'll just layer this up, security class. So I can see like B. Thomas has 9 roles. AC Accountant, AC has 9 security classes. And the security class, AC Data Entry has 45 forms. And here are the forms that are in that security class and the rule assigned. So these are mainly inquiry. You see the available function code and the rule assigned. That's for the AC Data Entry class. Now, you can do things like I call flattening out the model. If you just want to know user security, just group it by user, and B. Thomas has access to 1,748 forms, and those forms and the security is right here. I don't have to worry about the class. I don't have to worry about the role, just the user form access. Now, we can do things when I told you about looking at it from the bottom up. I can do grouping. I'm going to sort it by form. I'm going to group it by form. Then I'm going to group it by user. And I can see if a user has access to a form more than one way. So if I want to go to something like, let's take the first one here. 12 users have access to this form. And some of them, Sammy Christian has 9 different ways of getting to this form because I got a demo security model here. But you'll see all the security classes it's assigned to, what roles are assigned, the class they're assigned to, and up to the user. So this is conflicting access where I see they have inquiry, they have all access, they could have conditional access. And again, in this case, all access wins. So the other report, the analyzer, resolves this for you. So all you have to worry about for Sammy Christian is looking at AC00.1, you'll see all access. If you want to know how we get to that, you can expand that detail in the analyzer, and we'll show you all the different ways that you can get there and why we resolved it to all access. But that's why generally audit firms like the analyzer better, because they don't have to worry about looking at this report and knowing, okay, what level of access does this person actually get? So this is nice when you're doing things, if I want to come out, I can build filters at this level. I'll put in HR 11.1. It comes back and says there's 3 users have that level of access. Sammy Christian can get to HR 11.1 4 different ways. I see conditional logic, it's probably because self-service. And then all access, of course, is going to win here also. So I can look at critical forms, how many different paths people have to it. But I can do this grouping, sorting, filtering for all of these reports, right? Nothing, there's no one report that will prevent you from doing that. And then, of course, these are all exportable to Excel, exportable to PDF. You can save reports as favorites. You can come out here and build reports with all the criteria in it, and we'll have a list of reports. You can set them up on notifications, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with landmark. So I won't jump over the landmark thing now, but you'll have a similar group of reports on the landmark side. Now, when we get into the activity monitor, then we give you the ability, we call it the listener on this screen. And if you go to the user form detail here, and I just run this wide open, you'll see all the options I have there for filters: date, the user, the form, the key to the record. What am I looking for? But this is all the activity flowing through your system. So I can do the same type of thing here, which is why we provide this data within this grid format, because I have all these options to group it by user, I can group it by form, and I can see F. Nelson worked on 27 different forms. I want to know what he did on AM 12.1. There's three next records here, right? Now I could filter this down and say, you know what? Let me go to function code. I only want to see change records. So now I see F. Nelson on AP 10.1 did 4 changes, and I can, over to the right, I can see what records they are in, vendor 102, 107, and 118. Okay. So you have this type of functionality, and again, I could have grouped it by user, by form, by user. So now I want to go down all changes. I want everybody that's changed AR 10.2 or 10.1. 2 users have done changes there. Lawson's done 7, and those are the 7 changes. So we just provide all this data in this grid for you, and then you can filter it, export it, group it, whatever way you want that the data is meaningful to you. So that's what the monitor component does, where, again, I'm picking up all the activity. There's no rules surrounding what is going to get picked up. We're going to get everything. And if I go to transaction auditing, the difference there is, whoops, picked the wrong option. Transaction auditing. This is where I'm actually looking at the detailed level data. So I'm going to do a wildcard search on everything Lawson has done, And I'm going to get a grid back here of every transaction Lawson's worked on. Now I can go to advanced search here. I can put all kinds of date criteria behind it. I can look for a certain form. Again, I can look for, terms code has changed. This is where I can build those advanced features. I can also just search through this data by holding my control key down and selecting a field. So I'm going to look for every change. Let's just say every change Lawson has made. So I'm going to pick on a change, a super change in Lawson, and say search that data. So here's every change Lawson has made. Well, maybe I only care about changes Lawson made on 8/15. So I'm going to search on that data. But we'll have all this data behind the scenes. If you set a parameter up on what you want to audit, you have to tell either what users you want to audit or what forms or programs that you want to audit, and we'll pick up this data. And if I then want to know what was changed here, if I expand this, you're going to see I see all the data here, and the effective date was changed. I'll probably get down here. Here's an address change, right? So it was changed. Address 2 was changed from nothing to suite 1223. So we have all the data that flowed through, and I know every piece of data that was changed, right? And here's more of those changes, before and afters. And you can restrict that down to say, you know what, only show me the actual data that did change. And then when you come back and you view the data behind this, you don't have to get all the data that flowed through, but we have all that data that went through. It's just that when I go to changes only, I'm only going to get that piece of information. So that's the transaction auditing, which is different. So when you get into giving access in your application to an IT group or anybody that has full access, it's really important to, going back to the whole risk management idea, that you monitor what they're doing and you know what changes are being made. So Activity Monitor at least tells you everywhere they've been. If you need to also know what changes that might have been done, you'll need transaction auditing. And again, we can do this for any of the 7,000 plus forms in S3 and any of the business classes in Landmark. So I think that covers the first part, where it's increasing the visibility. Those are the steps that we went through: reporting, SOD, and then you get back into the decrease. So a couple of minutes here I have left. If I come back, let me close a couple of things out and go back to the home page. I can show you this. I won't go to the analyzer. That's where I can look at side by side and we resolve the conflicts, but that's another application. This is the whole role modeling application that I kind of showed you. We don't have time to look too much at that. But I'll go to SOD reporting here, and if I look at this risk analysis grid, I'm going to come up and I'm going to tell it, let me take a custom time frame of like 01, get a lot of data here up through maybe today, and I'll pick this profile. And this is where I'm going to paint the grid based on actual usage. So I can determine what period I want to look for the activity in the system. Maybe I only want to look for a couple of months back. And then I can say, you know what, I only want to look at the payable policies. And this is where I come back and I say, okay, this policy 321, which is maintain fictitious vendor and create a payment. I do have this user Lawson is using forms on both sides. I can come down and expand this and come down and say, okay, AP 10.1, they've done 37 changes. If I want to see what those changes are, here's the 37 changes that user's made and what vendors. Right now, I don't know the detail behind it. This is just the summary level. But I know then which forms are causing the problem here, so I can see that. Hope I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Here's my grid over to the right, and I can see for this AP 10.1, AP 150, and 155. So I can see the usage down here. Those are the ones that have been used. So this is where we're saying, okay, how would I resolve this? Well, maybe I'll delete AP Manager from the user Lawson. It's the simplest way to do it right now, to show you this. And I refresh that, and if I repaint my grid, right, I should have those conflicts are resolved. But again, there's a number of things we'll allow you to do in that simulation to say, how would I resolve this conflict? Right? But that's all the time I got. There's more product to show, but what we would encourage you to do, if there's something in here, and again, every piece here is modular. So we have a lot of customers that just have SOD and security reporting. Others that have security reporting and security modeling. So any combination will work together. The applications do connect, so you can drill from one to the other. So when you're in SOD, you can drill over to your reporting, that type of thing. But you can get them individually as a place to start and then grow up from there. So certainly feel free to contact us. All you customers that are currently on of ours, it's great to have you on. You might have seen some new functionality that was released this year in there. There's some more functionality coming out in the spring of 2020. And then, of course, a lot of you have most of these applications, so you might only have to add modeling and the risk analysis grid, which all you do, and you'd have the full SOD remediation product. So that's always an option for you, but it will bolt right onto the applications you already have. Right? So with that, I'll let everybody go. And again, I'll put this recording out there. I fumbled a little bit in the beginning. Unfortunately, I won't be able to edit that out, but I think that's okay. And if anybody wants to stick around and ask a question, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone. You can either send me a message on the chat, or you can just ask away. So I think, see if I can get unmute all here. So now there's still a number of people on. If you have a question, everybody's going to hear you, but I am too. Probably just.
Again, this is Dave.
Hi, Dave.